I think maybe it makes sense to do a round of introductions. I think a lot of people might recognize faces or avatars. Um, but Dave and I can sort of kick it off and then pass it around. So I'll start just brief intros too. I don't think we need to get into life stories, although that might be interesting. I'm Kristen, and for this event, I guess the hat that I'm wearing is one of the founders and builders of Ponder, a group blogging tool, and something that Dave and I worked on with developer Gustavo for, I don't know, like a year or so, but a lot of that time was kind of exploration, maybe more focused work for 9 months or so. So looking forward to sharing our experience with you. Dave, do you want to jump in?
Sure. I'm Dave, and I did the other stuff on Ponder, design stuff. I guess like by trade, I'm a product designer. That's where I made money. And I had a company called Carbon Made, which still is around, like a SaaS company that help artists showcase work. We started that in 2005, and I ran that for 13 years. Sold it to my partner. Still going. So that's my. Before that, I did a bunch of odd jobs here and there. Like I designed the first version of Scribd forever ago.
Oh yeah, I always
like
forget that.
So yeah, that's. Anyways, and then we started talking about like Kristen left her job at IBM, and we started talking about building some sort of knowledge tool kind of thing. And yeah, anyways, that's how I ended up here. So that's me. Hi.
All right, any volunteers, or should I pick someone? How about Leonard?
Been stuck down the path of intersection between creativity and logic, but have felt that I'm not free enough. So trying to make a new medium for software, thought, creating things, becoming free, I know. And for this hackathon, I'm working on a concept map slash collaborative learning edtech tool. Kind of graph thingy thing. Yes.
A thingy thing. I like it. More free software. All right, how about Juan?
Sure. Well, I was originally supposed to be a screenwriter, filmmaker, etc. until I got disappointed by that industry. And then I tried to make like a startup accelerator, but for content creators. And most recently, I was building a platform to share documentaries. No, not to share, to organize documentary screenings in any kind of screen, so that you could use them as tools to start conversations with your community around social issues and climate issues. And then COVID came over, so that doesn't work anymore. So I'm thinking like how to take that same idea to more of an online first community building, which has led me to think about annotating the videos with like conversation on top of the video, right?
Mm-hmm.
And besides that, I've been working with Jeremy and Michael on something related to angry citizens and how to use this energy from angry citizens that feel left out of the conversation to shape the world they live in, and how to take that energy that, if it's not used correctly, it will explode and have bad repercussions. But if we use it correctly, it could be used to build cool things and evolve society.
Very cool. Thanks, Juan. How about Jorge?
Hi, Kristen. Hi, Dave. Hi, guys. Well, yes, I'm a programmer. I'm mostly working on knowledge graphs right now, but I've worked on digital currencies before. And earlier this year, I had an experience of writing an article with sociologists and economists. And it was interesting because we used Google Docs to co-author this piece between 7 people. And it was the first time for most of them like writing an article together. So it was cool, but at the same time, it was sort of obvious that there's a need for better collaborative writing tools. So really excited to see what you guys are building.
Yeah, I've got questions for you. We'll probably pick on you when we get into things.
For sure. I'd love to.
How about Trevor?
Hello.
Hello.
Hey. So I'm Trevor. I'm a product designer. I'm really into like Figma and just kind of designing mobile apps, mostly in kind of the consumer space, steering towards like messaging, social media. I started out kind of like working in advertising and like the editorial side. So like using like Premiere and Avid and cutting commercials for like Apple and Nike and any car company you can think of. But I'm really into just kind of building products right now. I've been designing this new messaging app called YoCloud, and then inside of Interhact, I have a team with Afshin, Ari, and Leslie, and we're working on kind of a quick deployable chat link. So it's a way to kind of start conversations or really expand conversations like inside of a Twitter thread or anything like that, just to get everyone grouped together and just sign in without any friction.
Cool. All right. How about Connor?
Yeah, I'm a developer. Not really working on a project. I kind of like a moth, and this was a big shiny thing. And then I'm hoping everyone's sense of purpose rubs off on me,
Cool.
so that I can be a developer who builds things.
Awesome. Welcome. All right, Conrad.
Hello, software developer and first student.
Your mic's kind of breaking up. Am I the only one? Dave, are you hearing that?
Yeah, it's breaking up for me.
The switch devices. I'm working on doing some dishes right now. I've been neglecting chores with the hackathon, so I'm trying to get caught back up. So
It's reasonable.
sorry about the quality.
I totally understand. All right. So Dave and I didn't want to prepare too much. We wanted this to be mostly conversational, but I think I'll set the stage just a little bit to sort of tee things up. So we want to talk about designing Ponder, I think, on a few different levels. So sort of the philosophy of the design we'll interweave in. I think we'll get into some technical aspects of the design. And also like the design in the sense of how we built as a team. Kind of going for a term that I heard Leslie Angry Fern mention, poetic tech, a more mindful way of building technology. And that kind of rubs off in what the app feels like to use. So hopefully we'll get to talk about all kinds of aspects of designing Ponder. And I guess I'll ask you, Dave, if there's a specific part you want to jump in on, what feels like a good starting point.
I don't know. Let's see. The beginning, I guess. I'll share my screen and we'll go from there.
Cool.
All right.
Yeah, I guess I can share part of the motivation behind Ponder was we wanted to build something that we all could use. Dave, Gustavo, and I, and we have very different backgrounds, but really focusing on writing, whether it was, we called it journaling or blogging, whether it was for yourself or for an audience, we played around with that concept of audience a lot. So in some respects, we wanted to create and build something where you felt comfortable sharing yourself like you would in a journal with a group. And it wasn't all of Twitter, it was a smaller group that you decided who was in the group. So I think that's an interesting aspect to ponder as well. Might help.
Yeah, I'm just trying to figure out how to make this thing work.
Um,
Anyways, yeah. So I think what we should do is just walk through some of the app, how it got designed, all that stuff. And if anybody has any questions, we can go that route. I don't know if that sounds good or not. Here we go.
Yeah.
Yeah, so the some of what Kristen was talking about, like we sort of set out to design this thing in a way that was less of a sort of we're headed towards this very particular like application with this very particular style of posting or content, and like I wanted to kind of sort of build in a direction, use the thing, and see what popped up. And a lot of what was sort of floating around was, you know, graph databases, and then, you know, incremental capture of thinking, and then the potential of combining that thinking in some way to, you know, gain insight or you know, all of the things we've been talking about. So the first instantiation of this was a thing called the hopper, and it was this idea. I don't know if you guys, can you see this?
Maybe zoom in a little more.
Okay. I mean, it's nothing much to look at. Anyways, I mean, structurally, like it's there was a, you know, some basic keyword sifting kind of stuff, you know, the ability to like capture a thought somewhere, you know, have it in a list, and then, you know, maybe relate or merge these things. This is very early days stuff, right? We like it, you know, for a few months we were playing with like sort of chat interfaces to capture thinking. I got this in my head that you know, you're sitting there thinking, you're having a conversation with somebody. I started writing notes this way. Kristen was helping me sort of come up with a new note-taking system, and conversationally turned out to be a pretty good way of like capturing your thinking in a sort of raw format, and you could tag it pretty quickly, you know, if you did a bunch of iterations. So we started talking about building like a system called the hopper that would capture very quickly, you know, like you had a thought, it opened up, you dump it in there, you forget about it, and then it would spit it back to you based on something. We didn't work out the algorithm for that really. So we did some like experiments with like randomization. We got that working actually. But you know, you would get back these thoughts like once every period, and yeah, it was more noise than use. So anyways, that wasn't working out too well, and so we headed in the direction we sort of ended up, which is this like group journaling, group blogging tool. And so what you're looking at here is our like company like journal basically, and the idea is that like you come in the morning and whatever you're thinking about, like some stuff, then you can type into it in a sort of chat interface. And I, you know, spent a lot of time writing to myself in this thing. You could add it to collections. We did like, you know, this is what we're working on, sort of stand up kinds of things. You can add emojis. It's pretty, you know, save a draft. You can post it. You post it. It goes here. Pretty straightforward, right? Everybody else can do this. You can stick them in collections. So I put that one in outer, and it's in this list. And, you know, anyways, so we built this thing as a sort of private journal. You could add new ones. I don't know. I'm gonna stop here to see if anybody has questions because I'm unloading a lot of stuff. So need to make sure it's making sense.
Any thoughts or questions so far?
Yeah, I wanted to know, I really like the idea that you can capture in a separate window from the organization system. I
Yeah.
guess you can just go there, type, enter, and then you worry about where it is. How do you find stuff later? Is it just one feed, or do you
Yeah.
have a tagging system different from a folder structure?
Yeah, we had some technical limitations, so there was a lot of stuff we wanted to do. Where it ended up was basically the only organizational system is these collections. So you can any place. And we didn't add search yet, but that was next on the list before we stopped developing it. So you basically have this. So I'll go further into the thing. Like as a sort of knowledge management tool, it's a toy, right? At best. So we ended up deciding that it would probably be more useful to have it sort of as a public journal, group journal kind of thing. And so we just added the ability to, make the things public. So this is mine. I just started posting doodles and little writing things and stuff. And it's effectively like a quick and easy blog. So the direction we ended up going was something like a little communal Tumblr style posting thing. I spent a lot of time on Tumblr. So, it's image posts and like sort of medium form content. Kristen can probably show you some of her blogs to give you a better idea of where it landed, and then that might help.
We started like straddling knowledge management and publishing to an audience, and we were more interested in, I would say, the sort of early phase of ideation and thinking about something, so that you could have an audience where you could start sharing thoughts and ideate in a way that you weren't on the spot, so it was asynchronous. And more emergent. So you could be thinking something, and the way the text editor is designed is it's like you're chatting with yourself. So yeah, we got kind of obsessed with this sort of what happens when you write to yourself, but you're sharing it with other people. And we ran a few experiments. The coolest one was, Dave, I feel like you probably could do better at like the landscape for Hunkered Down, and I'll pull up that example and maybe we can talk about that.
Yeah. So while we were building out, like we had this concept that we tested, which was the chat style interface, like as a posting mechanism. Like you go in there, and if you can write to yourself in this way, in these like sort of atomized, sort of tweety, choppy, thinking style, you can get thoughts out really quickly. It's casual in a sort of way. And that's good for a certain type of sort of introspective writing. We didn't get a ton of people in the thing, so I don't know what the range on that is. But what we did find is more people tended to write more personally in the thing, and depending on the topic, obviously. So, and that's part of the appeal of the place, is it's sort of a low friction, like relaxed place to write. And the hope was that would produce a type of content that would be nice to be around, right? People who are telling maybe sort of longer stories or writing longer pieces, more thoughtful things. So one of the ways that we looked to test this was, and the concept of sort of a group journal it was like early in the COVID lockdown, like we're all going a little stir crazy or whatever. And we asked, I think it was like 14 or 15 of our friends to like write like a daily post based on a prompt that Kristen and I wrote that morning. And so then you'd get a group of people and they would all write into Ponder basically, and all the posts would show up and you could go check them. There's no notifications or anything like this. You know, you just come back if you want. And for 14 days, everybody did this. It was pretty fun, but we started getting burned out coming up with prompts that were topical because we made it sort of about like your life being locked down, hunkered down, basically. Yeah, and then we got, I think it was 100 plus responses from that group. And you know, some people did it nearly every day. It was interesting. And then we put that together into a zine that Kristen laid out in Notion. So I don't know, you know, there is room for a prompt-based tool like this to get sort of incremental knowledge in a problem space over time. That experiment was really fun. I think that if you had a group of smart people and you could give them little morsels to play with every morning, or you know, at some point during the day, and then have that in a feed, you can pop that together into some knowledge product. In the case of, I'm used to entertainment stuff, right? So I wanted to put in a zine, you know, because dumb designer, I got to make everything pretty. So anyways, you could do something more functional, obviously. I don't know if you want to show that, Chris.
Yeah. Feel free to jump in. Oops, not camera. If you have questions on anything Dave just said or comments.
Yep.
So I think what I'll do, you can see my screen, right?
Yep.
Cool. I'll jump around a little bit. So in Ponder, like what hunkered down looked like, I don't need to make it big, I guess. I will. This is like the inside of Ponder, not the published blog side, outward facing. And I can show you in just a little bit. There's like an easy toggle to keep it private. So it was just for the group of people that were part of this group. And I could show you just a little bit. These are the people that were in what we were calling the journal or the shared blog. So they all had their own profiles. They could create their own entries. And the Hunkered Down project, everyone just posted to the same collection and they had their own space to work with their thinking. So people would come in every day after the prompt and write in what they were thinking. Like Dave had mentioned before, just easy, quick capture. And I mean, we were pretty amazed that we got this many responses. And the more we were like reading through them, it felt like there was like a real vibe of like what people were going through at the time. Pick on Masha and you can see like we have different ways of showing the data. So again, it's pretty basic knowledge management, but we wanted this to be something that was pretty easy for people to navigate through. So less about research, more about like a toy, more consumer friendly. So you could filter different ways, but this is where you can take this so many different directions. So what we did, we analyzed the data. I've got all kinds of information that we collected from the experience, surveys from people, like why they got into this. One of the things that was really interesting was the experience, which I think is reflected in the design, is people felt comfortable being vulnerable, and not everybody in the group knew each other. And they were sharing all kinds of like little intimate details from their life. And in that regard, they were a little bit surprised and they were grateful for the space to be held to have this kind of conversation through writing, which was really cool. Like we weren't really expecting that. Like we had a hypothesis, but we didn't know if it would work. So it was really cool when it actually did work. So yeah, this is one example of it. The zine we created, and I can share a link of this too in the links channel, but I formatted this in Notion. We had so many conversations of where we could take Ponder. Like you could turn this information into, or turn the app into something where you could have more like editorial and organizational support. So you could create zines. You could make it more knowledge management and put a ton of bells and whistles for how the information was related to other pieces of information. And I think we should talk a little bit, Dave, about the chat log and how we've atomized thoughts within posts, but we'll get to that in just a minute. But yeah, it's a little zine, and these entries, if you get a chance to read it, it's pretty cool. Like, it's a little insight into people's lives and worlds that we collectively contributed to this journal. Everyone's is unique in a way, but they're variations on a theme. And it's something that I haven't really seen elsewhere. And as far as writing as a group, like a little bit different than Jorge was saying, where everyone's working on the same document. This is more, everyone's working in the same space on their own thing, and seeing like what that looks like what that feels like. I'll pause there. Any reactions or?
Can you reference each other's spaces, or is it?
Pardon?
Can you reference each other's spaces, or is it kind of like right in your own space? I guess, like, is there linking between spaces?
Not as such. So this is what we hope to find, like, to see if people wanted that kind of thing, right? Like, so we were starting out with as far as we got was, here's a space that you share with people, right? That space can be private or public, and that's it. Like, I mean, you can reference the content within the space with the people that you're playing with, right? If there was room to then connect spaces, I would have loved to do that, obviously, like, so you could have a hive of something. But we were going off the premise that it's more like an enclosed environment where you can play within an idea space. So say for instance you're working out some like longer term project and you don't really have anything set in stone with it. You're trying to find the project, right? And so a way to do this is to journal about it, to write about it within the space. This works really well for like writing scripts, sort of writing stories, doing sort of art projects where you're like passing things back and forth, right? Like visual thinkers can do this. Like, you have like a sort of concept designer or something, or you're trying to find the tone or feel of something, and it's not going to show up right away. Like, so you're sort of like doing mood board stuff and writing little pieces here and there, something like this. So Kristen had different sort of more technically minded ways of using this. My family actually started using this, using Ponder for doing a sort of like memory journal thing of the family. Like they started doing this spontaneously. It's actually really, really nice. Like for my birthday, here, I'll share that. Where is it? Whatever. Yeah, so like this is go away. Fine. My dad called it he hops thoughts because that's what his grandkids call him. So he didn't really know how to use it too well, which is that's a sign that the user interface needed some help. My dad couldn't get through it. But so they just started posting, like, these are little stories
We can't
about
see your screen.
Not at all.
I'm just seeing
Just
the Discord.
Cool.
Yep.
Yeah, not the window.
I'm new at computers.
Mm-hmm.
How about now? Good.
Yep.
Oh, that's why you do that. Okay. So yeah, basically posting old photos. I had never seen these from my family before. And the kids can sort of respond in these little chat bubbles and stuff. but yeah, it's sort of slow paced. Like they showed up, writing these stories whenever. There's no social pressure to the thing, yeah, that's another use case. That I don't know. That helps.
Thank you.
Yeah.
How about chat logging? Talk through that a little bit.
Chat logging. All right. I mean, yeah. So I think that somebody should do something really good with like chat interfaces and this kind of thing if I don't get to it, because I think it is really useful. And the version that I came up with was limited by my UI skills basically. So like I didn't know how to. I can paint, honestly. I can do CSS and this kind of stuff, and so any sort of higher level JavaScript stuff is out of my ballpark. And the developer we were working with was pretty far into the back end, so we had this big gap in the middle. So any of the sort of funner kind of, let's go look at drafts. Yeah, so what I was headed in the direction with the, mock-ups that packages and stuff that I could cobble together in React to make these things sort of draggable and movable. And, the next step would be to merge them and relate them and then tag them potentially. And then, we end up with a sort of second column, but, so that you could move stuff back and forth, drop it in drafts and then have them set up next to each other, these kinds of things. Didn't get that far, but I think that
it's kind of like where I'm picking up now working with Conrad, because there's something about this sort of like text editor that's really easy to write into because it's built on the design of chat. So like you take it for granted, like you don't think about it. You just start doing it. There's a little bit of a learning curve because when do you chat to yourself? I think some people do take notes like this, and there might be apps out there now, but it's great. But then after you get things out, I want to pull it into like a canvas or something where I can start playing with ideas, merging them, organizing them. But reading things, it's sort of a mess when it's in the spatial, like oriented plane. So there's some kind of jumping back and forth, I think, that would be really nice for knowledge management. But this sort of look at capturing information and starting the conversation and reading is kind of nice. I don't know if anyone's experimented with that kind of writing to yourself or chatting to yourself, even if it's literally texting yourself.
I really want to concur on that. For the last 1.5 years, I think, I every day had a similar kind of interface. So I just go to my computer, press one key, and then I can write, and it's write only. I write, hit enter, and then I can't change it, and it becomes timestamps. But then I also have a certain syntax that I write, and I wrote in some kind of simple scripts so I can filter it and extract information. So I can see, okay, how have my sleeping pattern been? What have I done these kind of days? And I have some tagging filter as well to be able to extract some data. But the ability to just go to the computer and just write is great. And I love the idea of chatting interfaces like that.
I actually do the same thing, syntax and everything. And then I just keep it all in basically a text file so I can like grep through it and pass it through other programs if I need to. It's definitely set up like a chat system, but without any like program running on top of it.
I think it makes a lot of sense. I was just trying to get to the consumer version of this way too early, I think. Because like what you guys are doing, you can manage your systems, right? Because you can program. So it's trying to sort of give people the same sort of posting experience. Like there's like very little between you and putting something on the internet with people, and obviously there's lots of places do that. You can do that in Discord, right? But the sort of
paired with someone who
like
also knows all the
mute
case
whoever is
I
talking
feel like
because I can't hear
I think
myself.
I got it. I think it was
maybe we'll just
Leslie.
really
Yeah.
like it's just a hateful place.
Yeah. So it's this is back to the
know
sort
that
of
there's-
design side of
we can
things,
look
right? Like
video
how can you make an
where people
environment
are on there because
where
recording,
people can do
and
something that
there's
there
also, like,
is
racist rules that
a decent
happen.
amount
I
of
just saw
friction
one today,
to
actually,
doing,
like,
right? So you
this,
guys
like,
are talking
guy,
about the systems that
who
you've
was
designed
online,
are
and
like
he started, like,
seamless, right? You hit one key and you're in
like,
the
score
thing,
on it.
right?
And
Most
you
people
have-
can't make that stuff for themselves. They don't know how.
Yeah, and
They,
it
you
was
know,
just,
like
like,
maybe
that's
if they're
when-
good enough on,
it's so
a
weird,
Mac
like,
or something,
any
they can make
social
some
media
macros
app,
or,
like,
something
tangled
like
with
this, or,
TikTok, like,
but,
I tried at Yubo once,
trying to,
and then I realized it was like being advertised.
give
on TikTok,
people
and then, like, later on,
some
yeah,
of
like,
these
my
writing
last
tools
experience with
to
wasn't good,
condition
so I
it,
was just
like
confused.
that
Like, after
like
I
writing out your
TikTok
brain is a
it,
good thing that you can make you a little
But
smarter.
yeah, I feel
I don't know, this kind of stuff.
I
And
don't
then
know. Amigo,
hopefully
like, I
the
haven't
idea was to
like,
build on that
really,
to something more
really
technical.
fruitful conversations on it.
I don't know that that's a great way of going about it. I wouldn't do it again, but here we are.
Yep. That's why we're not moving forward with it. We kind of got stuck with where to go from here. What was the most important thing? We sort of, we ran out of runway, and it was just like, do we want to salvage this? What's there to salvage? So it's sort of, we see it as a jumping off place and hoping that people can learn from what our experience has been and take it from there.
I see the two important points being, especially as you described it, the friction. So currently, to get people to write, it's quite hard. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yep.
It's a lot of friction. It's a lot of friction. And just when you go to the computer, you might want to write something, but then you need to open the program and you need to find it and you need to save it. And so absolutely for sure.
Yeah, I think we're hoping that the social aspect, like the communal aspect, would sort of give people an incentive to play together. Like the idea is that you have a place to go put something. It's already, all of it's worked out for you, right? Like you don't have to design anything. You don't have to like make it look pretty. You don't have to choose fonts. You just you go into a text box and you start writing stuff. And there's also nothing pinging you, right? But there are other people there, and those other people are in a space where you want to talk to them. So like about something, right? So I still would like this place to exist. Like, it's not Discord. It's not a Google Doc, right? Like a Google Doc it feels like it's falling apart the whole damn time. And everybody's like, it is the thinnest possible presence, like you kind of see an avatar or whatever. And the actual tooling of the thing is terrible to use, right? Like, especially if you come from making anything with fancier tools, like and it doesn't need to be completely smooth, but it would be nice if it were thought out for this kind of group thing. And I think that there are different cadences to working too. You have real-time stuff where you need a fast interface where you can pull things and you're chatting in real time. And then there are more considered like slower paced interfaces, right? And those are going to be something that are, maybe you can expand on something, like they're like larger objects in some sense that you can combine and, sort of work with. But no. All that was pretty visual. I don't know if you guys are following. So I see this stuff in my head, so I, don't know if it's communicating. I say thing and that and this a lot.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. I don't know if it was a conscious design decision or not, but representing pieces of text as cards instead of having this blank space, which make us think about paper, right? For me, that generates two very different feelings. Yeah. On one side, when you have a blank space, you have to fill it, and it feels like, you're never done. Whereas when you have standalone cards, it gives you, the ease of just capture whatever you want, and it will occupy that space. I don't know how you guys went about that, if it was a conscious decision or what.
The content sort of dictated the form. Like, that's how I like to do it as much as possible. So you end up with, the tool is producing a type of content, and then that content within a range, responsively has to be displayed. And the constraint of a system will dictate the kinds of things that it can display and the types of content that it'll produce. So, you have 280 characters in a like rapid stream, you're going to get the world's like neurons firing on a stream. Like that's what it is, so you get Twitter. If you have something that is a little bit softer and maybe a little bit longer form, but like it's not going to really work if you put 10,000 words in it, right? Like it's just going to look like a wall of text. Then the feeling that you're going to get using the tool is going to limit you to a certain range, and then that fits in a card nicely. This is all very precious. I spent too much time on it, I think. So but yeah, like there was something else I was going to talk about there. Like, yeah, I don't know. I think the cards were also an attempt to move in a direction that these things were going to be groupable and sortable, and like even if there was a visual component to them, that you grab one of those things and you pop it over here into a group, and there's a sort of visual relationship without it being like a 1997 VR desktop or something, right? Where yeah, so yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, it makes sense. I like that. I never thought about it as letting the content shape the interface. We usually go about that process in the opposite direction.
Yeah.
Like design the frames and then fill it with text. So I like that approach. Sounds good.
Yeah, and I mean it's sort of using the affordances of the real world. Like if there's a lot of talk about Zettelkasten right now and all this kind of stuff, and you have note cards, and you can only put so much on a note card before it becomes not useful anymore, right? And so that design constraint is you can build a system around that because they're all standardized and they, exactly. So like it's a having some sort of affordances like that in a system, these simple constraints can produce a lot of creativity because you're taking the onus off the the individual user to figure out all this stuff, right? You can also turn it into a toy but there are some useful toys, I guess. So
probably like a happy medium somewhere in there, but
yeah.
it does help to feel some kind of constraint, I think, when writing, like we're talking about, because the big open canvas can be hard, but it's not too many like orders down the road where once you start thinking you want more flexibility. So I think it's like equanimity. There's some sort of middle with giving too much room to roam and not enough.
Yeah, I started getting into the mindset that I'm like, all right, well, how can you give like, more of hypertext to normal people? Like, can my parents use this thing and then tie up like a web of information? Yeah, they'll just do it. People do it in conversations all the time. Like you watch them talk about this like elaborate family structure and you're like, can't follow half of it. Like, so yeah, and people, I guess I like making technical things for people who are less technical. So that influences a lot of this thinking. So I know the crowd is mixed here. Like you guys are like hyper crazy good at this shit.
How was that sentence again? Like hypertext for the people? Was that something on
yeah.
I really like
hypertext for normies.
Yeah, it sounds cool. Like
yeah.
it.
Yeah, I mean, so yeah, the big thing that I was trying to get across with the interface stuff was like, can you make an environment to do something as like sort of, especially if you're just starting to learn how to write for yourself in any way, right? Note taking, whatever. Like if you're trying to get a little bit longer form, you've not thought about getting your thoughts out. I mean, we all do this all the time, but most people they don't think for fun, and there can be a way to do this, I think. Like I think we were heading down this sort of prompting direction. Like there's some influence I have from like my early computing experiences with my family. Like we got online with the Commodore 64. This would have been in like the late 80s. And there were like the only game that you could play with other people on this service, it was like some dial-up thing, was Jeopardy, like in a text interface. but it was crazy fun. Like you would get these prompts and then you'd sit there, and we sat there around a keyboard doing this, right? So there is some equivalent to this that I think is good. Like you can bring people together that don't necessarily need to be extraordinarily technical to sort of, communicate in text, chat online in the way that they can. They're not going to want to be on the computer all the time though, right? So give them an interface that's pleasurable to be in, that's easy to sort of pick up on the fly. You don't have to worry about a lot of widgets and gizmos and stuff. And it sort of teaches you the more complex aspects of what it can do over time. It's sort of pulling from gaming this way, right? Because games do a very good job, variable good job of this. So this is the direction this is the playground that we were trying to play in.
Just showing like an example of that. So one of like the demos that we came up with. Can you see my screen? Yeah.
Yep.
Make it a
Cool.
bit shorter.
Shorter.
We'll change that. Yeah, I guess.
Does it look okay?
Yeah.
Cool. One of the demos I came up with, this is just me having a conversation with myself, which was a very odd way of thinking, but for those of you that went to the blog club earlier, it's sort of a similar thing, but making it async, where Dave, do you want to stop sharing too?
Sure.
So, I guess I can stop watching.
If that's what you need.
Well, it was distracting me for some reason or other. So the idea of having a more like free-ranging conversation in text, but asynchronously. So kind of like with Blog Club, where it's whatever comes up, there's no like set questions. People are just kind of sharing what their experience is. So I did that with a book because I thought it'd be interesting. Came up with a few personas of people. I think the book that I did was This is Marketing by Seth Godin. And just having this experience. Oh, cool. Thanks.
Yep.
Of multiple people sharing their perspectives. There's ways to communicate with them. And this is the blog version of it. So we're not in the app right now. Let's see if I can find.
Wait, but you wrote all those multiple persons?
Yeah.
Yeah, like a crazy person.
Personality disorder.
Okay.
But that's, so the weird thing is that I feel like I have these different experiences when reading something where it's like part of me is interested in this aspect, like this part of me is like, oh, I'll take a more psychological take on that. So there's like these different personas within me. It was interesting. It like gave me the space to write a book review from different aspects of me.
Do you have fast toggle between personalities, or like is that, what's the process of switching between because like I've played around with the Twitter alt thing, but the process of switching between alts is slow enough to like break the flow.
We have the same problem.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, we didn't find
fragmented,
this until
I feel
she
like.
did this. Yeah.
Our
friend, or
this is the canvassing model helps with this. So like this is where you're sort of restricted by something like what we have with Ponder, where the input is linear. So what I want to, like what ends up happening, and I'll use other places to do this to get to the same spot, is have like a canvas open where I just dump all of my thoughts and I just keep going and going. I do this over time. I usually use Roam, and then I start organizing things, and I look for, commonality, and then these personas sort of arise. But it would be nice to have it in a place. Like what was nice about using Ponder was that I had, again, that constraint that sort of forced me to write it in a way that other people might look at it and want to comment on it. So then they're like little posts, and that makes it a little bit more accessible. I want to find one, because I was even having conversations with myself within conversations with myself. Oh, come on. Oh, that's why, because it's all internal. Here we go.
If you had search, it'd work better.
Well, if I remembered how things worked, I kept getting confused because it's pretty close one-to-one being in the app and then what the forward-facing blog looks like. And there's been a few times where I'm like, am I in the blog or am I in the app? Yeah, so like this one, I'm having a conversation like where I'm telling myself, oh, you're not a coward, and here's what I think. Like, play around. But I don't know, it was nice to have this space to sort of workshop a book, and it would be cool if other people were in there instead of just me doing it by myself, but it worked out.
Yeah, so Satya, he made, what's his name, Kristen? Antar stuff?
Yeah, what is his Twitter handle?
He ended up being one of the only people using the thing, and came up with this app where you can manage multiple personas and chat between them. It's an Android app. And a bunch of people are using it. They seem to like it a lot. He uses it all the time to sort of work out brain stuff.
I'll drop a link from his Twitter. Antar is the name of his app. But one of the things that came up for him early days using Ponder was he immediately wanted to have like explore the different personas with self. It's been cool watching his product grow. Anything else about design constraints, anything you want to talk about? We are down to hold the space.
Yeah.
We want to bring it off Ponder. That's
lots
cool.
of weird little decisions. If you want to know about any of them, I don't know how you would want to know, but yeah.
So was this more like conversations between different people answering back and forth, or was it more like several monologues, but all in the same place?
I would say monologues with the caveat that we had a conversation tool built in, so you could have conversations within each post, and that would give you space to sort of connect with people and have more of a dialogue, but still asynchronous. But then you were in dialogue with another person.
Yeah, we came up with this way of doing comments. It was sort of, we had the idea, I'm sharing the screen. This thing was going to be an open world kind of network at some point, right? You know, it's just sort of longer form Twitter kind of deal. Because that was the easiest thing to build. And we wanted to sort of solve for like cross chatter and these kinds of things. And one of the things we came up with was these things called conversational tunnels, where the original poster, like, they would have their post up, and then people could come in and then start conversations, sort of respond. This is her post, and they're locked into just a one-on-one conversation. You can read them, but you can't participate in them. So it seemed to be nice. You know, you get sort of these chill little like, hey, what's up? Like, rather than a big mess of a conversation. I don't know that you want that, but there's a design thing. If you ever need it, it works. So you just have to find, I think it needs a home. In ours, we didn't really have a problem. Like, there weren't enough people in there trolling each other. It was one of these things, we're solving for problems that didn't exist, like way before they needed to be solved for. So yeah.
Yeah, Ponder's kind of like a design depot. Hopefully we
It
can
really is.
pick and
I got a bunch
choose
of patterns
components
in
of
here.
it
Yeah.
to implement elsewhere.
I think
Show
that's
you how
cool. So you could read what other people answered,
Yeah.
but not okay.
Yeah. So here's an
Could
example.
could like the person that started that like subthread invite more people into it?
See, this is the
We
direction
wanted to go that way. Yeah. So that if you started seeing like Jana wrote this post and she's got Masha, Gustavo, Dave, and I all talking. If there's some way from like this like place to be like start a group chat room or something where
just
everyone's
invite
like,
somebody
hey, what's
over.
up? Yeah.
And then, ideally that's pretty seamless. And then
That's cool.
You're building these little conversations on the fly. And then
It would be nice if you could have like some sort of tags under each conversation that sort of tell you what it's about.
Yeah, I mean, you could name the thing like the equivalent would be sort of like an iMessage or this kind of text groups or something where you can brand them. This is my whatever group. You could do that with ideas, these kinds of things, because you're forming these little clumps around something, and then they sort of dissipate. You move back to the mainstream. So part of this is trying to use like existing social network patterns, like stream based stuff, to move people to a slower way of posting with each other. Like, because all of the social sites are basically the same at this point, right? You've got some mainstream that you're posting into, and you've got itemized posts that people interact with and to try to attract attention. So that's the majority of the interface knowledge that people have. They're used to operating this thing. So you can take advantage of what they know and then try to offer them a model that is a little bit healthier for them, is the idea. So don't try to reinvent everything with a brand new interface. Most people won't be able to use it or learn it. They don't have the time. They don't care. So the premise here is to try and pull from existing sort of heuristics and then tweak them just so oops, you're enlightened, that kind of thing. Easy.
Sounds easy.
Yeah, no problem. You just need people using it, so that helps.
I think it's cool because like you say, most current social media are very much emotion driven.
Yeah.
It's like a fast pace, just like spitting out what you feel right in the moment, but you don't really think about it.
No filters, no nothing.
That's a shame.
And the more shocking the content to your psyche, the better it plays, because you're in that sort of frazzled state. Advertising works better. So yeah, exactly. So yeah, I think that we need to figure out patterns that sort of work against that without like grading against it necessarily, right? Like, because you can overswing and make everything asocial, and there are no fun little gimmicks and stuff to keep you coming back into the conversation. So part of this project was like an attempt to find some of these things that might be a little healthier to be on. Like, you're not on the computer 12 hours a day or whatever. It induces breaks. We talked about like wanting to add like a seasons system to the thing potentially, like so that like maybe you have a group that you're posting with, and that group dies or ends. It doesn't need to always be there forever. Because it gives it value, right? So like, if you're only going to be posting with these people for 3 months, it doesn't mean you can't go post some other stuff with them for 3 months, but give these things a sort of life cycle. This is how the world works, right? The problem with the internet is it's become a goddamn casino and it's open 24/7. I lived in Vegas for a while, so I know what it does something to you. And so shut it down every once in a while. Say good night. good night, we're all signing off. The early internet had this, and it felt really good. Like, and also the hackathon. These kinds of things, they induce these like communities, but you got to shut it down at some point. You got to go recharge and come back with something new, right? So, having it sort of built in, this could take the pressure off.
The compression of time gives it a certain something that makes it special,
Yeah, exactly.
Yep.
I think that this
time doesn't really exist on the internet without giving, like, intentionally somehow building in those constraints, like a hackathon. I think that's a good, like, obvious example. But you can build in those elements to software, so you can be more intentional, deliberate about what you're doing. Yeah.
Yeah. So there's also the concept of sort of a rhythm that, like my friend Vin, he's building this site called Futureland, like it's futureland.tv. And, it's sort of a personal project and like consistency. So that it's based on daily journals. And like for every project that he has in his life, he posts sort of, a record of him doing this. Maybe it's some writing, maybe he's doing a bunch of design and coding and stuff. And he's got a log there, and it's based on streaks. And then it's an open community, but people can join each of these journals and say they're all trying to drink more water, and they just put like a water emoji in there, and it's the loosest community, but it's people supporting each other in consistency, right? And so there's a rhythm to the thing that everybody's showing up daily. You have the same sort of character showing up, and it's, he's pulling it together. It's a piece of crap, but he's making it work. It's fun, right? So I wanted to do a similar kind of thing, right? Like, add this as a part of your practice, right? Like you wake up in the morning, you type out some stuff. Maybe there's a prompt there. You respond to this thing, you shut it down. It's not pinging you all goddamn day. You come back, you open it up like a nice book. You read from your friends, this kind of thing. It's like, hey, I'm going to be offline in like a number of minutes. So get your reading done or whatever, if you want. These things, I think somebody should play with them. So, yeah.
A cozier internet.
Sure. The fast-paced internet is, we got plenty of it. You can go get that anywhere you want.
Any other thoughts or questions? Anything potentially seemingly unrelated that you thought of while we were talking? We can chat about whatever.
You can also do a ask a designer anything thing. I've been product designing for a very long time on stuff, and if you have any questions, I might be able to answer. Pretty open.
I think you thought earlier, you said earlier, Kristen, that you wanted to use it to like develop stories with other people or something like that.
Yeah, actually, I used to ponder a little bit with a friend of mine. We were both sort of ideating on our own sci-fi stories, but wanted to share in what we were coming up with along the way. So that was more of a private journal, but doing character sketches and talking about like, what's the predominant economy in your world? Like, where is it set? And like asking each other questions, kind of prompting each other to get the juices flowing and just have a space where we could like, I'm going to go work on this or spend time thinking like in that area, which was nice. And like doing background research and putting that in there, just whatever sticks.
And like, what about the design do you think helped towards doing this?
I think more of what we talked about earlier, just having a place to go that that it's semi-private. It's not going to be shown to the world, because a lot of this is super vulnerable, because neither of us had really thought these thoughts out before. We hadn't shared them with anyone. We are not published sci-fi authors. We don't know like how we would go about sharing our work. So yeah, like what's a place where, again, like you can leave the note. It's not, there's no pressure to it. Leave the post and then come back later and you can see that someone's responded. Wasn't really designed to do real time, but we would find times offline, off the computer, to talk. And that would influence what we were sharing with each other in Ponder. So yeah, it's like a notebook, like a shared notebook. In that regard, and
yeah, sorry.
It's quiet. Like I don't feel like people are watching me. I'm not worried about it, but I know watching me. So there's, again, like it's not just doing it for myself. I'm doing it so that someone else would understand, which is good because then I better understand what my own thinking is.
Yeah, and there's another component to that. Like you can do it privately, and it's using a posting model. So there's, you're filling out a post and then you're sending it, and that act of like sending, there is a little bit of a moment of publishing there that's good for writing. I think just get it out of your head, and then we had the concept of making these things public. So it's it's on the internet. Nobody's watching, right? Like unless it's crawled, but there is something to pushing your ideas out into the world. Like they're on a URL. Like you could link it up, right? That doesn't mean you have to, but it's nice to do this. Like it gets the sort of gunk out of your head, like so that you can actually post something that's worth a damn. Like I think that especially if you're trying to set up a practice where you're blogging more, or if you're trying to put more material out, you're in a phase like that. Some people want to be more public. This could help with that because it's low stakes, like high frequency publishing, basically. And you can do it with a little audience, right? Like, and it doesn't, you don't need 5,000 people following you. Like, it's not good.
Yeah.
For most people.
You don't want 5,000 people following you to start playing with ideas.
Yeah.
You
But
can
12
you
or
can
something is very
broadcast
nice.
elsewhere. Yeah.
Especially if those 12 people read what you're writing.
Yeah, it feels good to get feedback.
Yeah.
Like someone actually read it.
So yeah, we were playing a little bit with audience and publishing and the sort of like broadcast kinds of things that are in social media, but without, still get a little bit of the adrenaline rush that does sometimes produce. I mean, again, hackathons, you're pushing yourself so that you can see what creativity can come out. These little tricks to like make you feel a little skittish, sometimes that's good because you get over that and you gain a bit of resilience in that process. So yeah.
Yeah, so it could be used to do like writing hackathons or something.
Writing what? Sorry.
It could be used to do like hackathons based around writing.
Yeah. But like one of the
Sure.
hopes that I had with it was like, sort of collaborative story a day kind of thing, or people could throw a bunch of, you're writing within a universe potentially, like, I don't know, you build some little world with a group of people, Dungeons and Dragons or something like this, this style, and you're trying to flesh out the world, and each person is good at different parts of that, right? Somebody's very good at the like scenery kind of things or the mapping or something like that. Somebody's good at character development. You can like sort of play with these things and make something. I don't know. Didn't get that far.
Yeah. Like a writing workshop or something.
Yeah.
You could have someone giving prompts and everyone in the group is doing a character sketch that day and giving feedback to other people. So similar like to the way that the hackathons site is designed too. You share a little bit of what's going on. People can give feedback. That one's, I think, public to everyone, but the people that are actually commenting and like in the mix are the community that we have around Interhacked. So same sort of mentality.
Yeah, Ponder
but just
instance would have
writing.
worked for that had it been
Yeah.
working.
I think the idea of like a writing based game would be like absolutely incredible.
Yeah.
I've tried to start like D&D campaigns, before, and they always disintegrate at some point. There's maybe like one or two people though that get really into the storytelling, like as much as I do, and everybody else just wants to murder hobos. This would be perfect for like, designing those kind of worlds, because you could also build in that same environment. I could describe a town and what certain figures were doing there. And then that town still exists, and the consequences of those characters still exist for other people to tie into. That would be a lot of fun.
I mean, that would be amazing.
AI dungeon, but without the AI.
Exactly.
Dungeon.
People dungeon.
Perfect.
Yeah, that was the stuff like that was the hope. Like a sort of, I still have some hope of creating like a sort of creative community that is multimedia based, that allows you to sort of post these multimedia things together to build some larger work. I don't know what that is, right? And like what the actual forms are there. But yeah, like something more than just images and text and whatever.
Yeah, I think process wise, approaching designing something, it's way easier if you're working already with a community of people, a group of people, and you all want something similar. You have a similar like pain point in the world, and if it's collaborating together in whatever specific way, it's so much easier. And like part of those people are designers and developers, and then you build it for the group. But the group that we had was so weird. It was the group of three of us like building the thing. We folded people in along the way, but finding like that sort of community of people that sort of need the software for a reason, sort of 101, that makes a lot of sense. You have people to test it, you have people to build it for, they're building it with you.
Yeah, also you're making a communal app, you should probably do it communally. Just, because the DNA of how the thing gets built is always there, right? Especially the early days builders. They're all over the thing. You can see their sort of decision making everywhere. So if you're going to build something that has a sort of community spirit, I think that doing it open and with a bunch of people who are like sort of chucking in on it is a good way to do these things. I don't know how you maintain quality and all that. I mean, just open source debates, all these things, right? But
well, we like started with that where it was pretty communal and collective, a lot of people throwing in, and then it became just Dave, Gustavo, and I building it, but other people were still interested. It was like hard to figure out how to fold people in. So it's this sort of, how do you build like a studio environment and still like knock something out that like is somewhat focused and directional. People have different amounts of time that's available.
Yeah, pieces of software like this, my previous company, it came out of running a studio, and you need software to run your studio, and you're using it all the time, right? And it gets polished by dint of being used all the time. And then one day you're like, I bet other people want to use this. And then you put a marketing site on it and put it out in the world. Like, it's a very good way of making valuable software, because if you're running a business with a piece of software, or you're trying to, in my case, it was we needed to maintain a studio website in the mid 2000s without having to hire somebody to do it. So write a content management system, put a bunch of fancy graphics on it, and artists love it. So make it easy for artists who are scatterbrained primarily. Like, they're not good at managing a lot of media and stuff like this. So make a pipeline for them where you put an image in this box and then it goes onto the internet and then you call it a portfolio. So, building chat systems and communication systems, I think you need to make them and use them with the people who are very involved with it. It's the same thing as writing stories with people. Like, if they're not involved, then you're just going to be creating in a vacuum, and you'll get pretty software out of it, but nobody's using it.
Yeah, it's the difference between like having like random people be like, oh, maybe I'll write a story,
Yep.
or having like a team that is like actually it's like a writer's room that works on a series, right?
Yep. Exactly that.
Yep.
And I think having a tool for that specific case would be very interesting.
I hope somebody builds it.
Yeah,
I'd like to use it.
me too.
Yeah, it's like finding the incentives to do this, because you could go raise VC maybe and stuff like that, but then you have to grow the thing like crazy, and so this comes back to like finding the money to work on projects like this. It's tough, right? Especially full time, unless you can go make a mint and then it's a passion project and you can work on it, but that's rare enough. I mean, engineers have a better shot at that because you can leverage your abilities and make a lot of money up front, but what are you selling to do that kind of thing? So yeah, it's tough for these projects. I think that the only way that they really work is if you have people who are dedicated to tossing in on them, right? Because they want to see them exist in the world. And I think you can have a small, like, call it 6 to 12 people building like pretty nice software, like for fun without it being a complete nightmare. And then obviously other people who can help on all the other stuff that you need to do. Like, there've got to be equivalents of people doing this in the past, like they build a car together or something, right? It's the same kind of thing, right? You get a garage and you're like, all right, we got 6 guys who know how to do something. Gals too, guys and gals, just to be clear. Anyway, I talk like an old guy, so it doesn't go over well sometimes.
Guys, did you try showing this to other markets? I love the one you picked, but I would imagine that this would cover, if you describe this as a way of mental health management, for example,
Yeah.
like I would easily see this as a tool used by companies that suddenly had to work remotely and want to manage the stress of online work. Of course, I would add the anonymity layer so that you can express your sentiment around the direction of the company or complain about specific stuff, or even like say, hey, this is not working or something, which is very hard to do in person or online if you have to use your name. So I don't know if you explore other markets, but if you're looking for a different direction, I definitely see more than one option, this being one.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're right. Like, there's a bunch of places. It ultimately came down to the working relationship we had building this thing wasn't going to survive. So, philosophically, we were too misaligned as a team. So, pivoting like that was just not going to be. It's a good idea. Like, I would have loved to move it in that direction potentially. But yeah, that's my answer to that. So we could talk about that separately. I think that interfaces like this would be good for people, especially in big corporate environments where like everything is surveilling you. So like, is there the equivalent of a sort of secure place that feels decent to talk about things that matter, right? Staffed by people who can sort of, that I think is also a cultural thing. So we would have had an uphill battle trying to pitch that culture unless we potentially put like you get somebody who's a sort of expert psychologist or expert meditation teacher and they back it, and then you can market it that way, and then corporate people like that.
Yeah, I think there's a few use cases here for people who are working with groups in some way, shape, or form, whether it's a company or some kind of like writing workshop or something like that, where you could make the tool so it would be easier to work with the group or share information in the group setting. But we were going at it from like a very consumer angle instead of going to like, we had a whole thing about hierarchical structures and we don't want to deal with that. And we want it to be all decentralized and, you know, people will just opt in and then, but then you have to deal with that whole like, well, who's opting in and how does this work?
Governance system.
How do you pitch this? Yeah.
You know, that stuff is fun. I want to play with that, but I also just wanted to make a thing to make it easy to publish stuff to a nice place on the internet again. So yeah, I think you can have both. Just make everything an NFT and you're good. Fine.
I hope you guys get a chance to work on it again. There's definitely room for that. I mean, that's an unsolved problem.
Yeah.
Surprisingly, 2020.
Doesn't make any sense. Why doesn't this exist? So
exactly.
Like, why isn't human communication solved yet?
Yeah, you know, in its most basic form.
There seems to be this theme where at Interhact, people at Interhact, like it's a place you go. I guess it is. This gets me every time with the digital stuff. Like I feel like I'm somewhere, but I guess I don't know. Like I lose track. Like Conrad was doing dishes earlier, and at one point in the week, my dishes were like stacked in the sink. I'm like, I forget where like I am like in geographic space. I totally forget what I was gonna say. Where was I starting with that?
I don't know.
See, there you go. Going somewhere, being at Interhact. There was a theme. Oh, people like Leonard talked about this. Yeah. Being able to just be able to connect different apps and connect different environments and like being able to translate between different mediums so that you could be typing something, but then that somehow connects with like video somehow, which connects with music, and like there's a way of integrating across these things so that everyone can communicate in their own way and the language is different, but there's still connections being made. I think that would be cool. I think the multimedia aspect of that I think would help with the communication challenges and just translation issues where it's hard to understand people. You're like, just listen to this music, maybe you'll understand. You're like, holy shit, that helps. Let me write a little post about that. Someone makes a video about it and then bundle that all up, and that encapsulates a vibe. That would be cool. Seems like people are interested in going that route. I mean, how feasible it is, I don't know, but
yeah, the place that I ended up with the whole project is like during this time I started making a lot more art for whatever reason, because the actual project wasn't going great. It was taking forever. So I started journaling more, like consistently, you know, and it was a good way to sort of keep a cadence with that. It's like sort of creative training, because you need to show up and do little bits of it, and you get an emergent something out of that. You keep showing up every day and making bad drawings. One day you're going to make a good drawing. And you know, having that in mind and having a place to do that like other people can see your progress. Even you don't need like accolades for it. You just need to be in a group with other people doing these things, right? And then every once in a while somebody's like, oh, I really like that one, and maybe that goes with something that I'm making, or you know, like you have the potential for collaboration. You're planting seeds. It's a proof of work in a creative community kind of thing. If you're posting the small efforts that you're making every day to try and push, you know, your abilities. So I think that we definitely need a place like that. I'm using Futureland as a sort of proxy place to do this, but artists don't have any place that's not trying to sell them shit constantly. Like, so yeah, or sell their stuff, like, you know, where they make no money. So yeah, I don't know, that needs to be community owned and stuff too. So yeah.
I dropped a link to Futureland in the links channel. It's kind of nice though. There's.
Go ahead.
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
I was gonna say it makes sense because I don't know exactly why, but over the last few months I totally stopped posting on Instagram and Facebook,
Yeah.
and it's just like it doesn't make any sense. Like, why am I doing this?
Yeah.
Yep.
Am I just
And what does it
looking
feel
for
like to
the
post there?
acceptance of someone, or
Yeah. Yeah. It took me a long time to
Exactly.
work that out because I started on all these networks really early, like when they were just goofball paradises, basically, right? And at the time, I didn't really I was making interfaces and having, you're manipulating people effectively. You're making them go down pipelines and, whatever. But generally, like, my company, we decided never to put any advertising on there, never to do any sort of algorithmic stuff. And it worked fine. Like, and people stayed customers for a really long time without us having to try very hard because they were getting value out of it, and we kept the software good. This is a nice thing. Yeah, and during this period, I'm using Twitter a lot. I'm using Instagram a lot. Never use Facebook. Tumblr a ton. Tumblr never got sophisticated with their advertising stuff because Yahoo bought them and ruined the whole thing by neglect. So that works too. I mean, that actually saved a bunch of my artistic abilities probably because I had a big following on Tumblr. And so I would go back there, even though I don't, you'd get like tens of thousands of feedback things, right? And no conversation, nothing, just because it would get put on some explore page or something, and you would get the world's internet traffic following, like going past an image you made, and you're getting all these likes, and nobody talks to you. It's absolutely lonely. It is so brutal. And I never had the thing go viral on Twitter after sort of the weirding stuff, the 2016 craziness, right? Where politics is really, really bad. But I had a lot of fun. Like I came up in a group of people, like a lot of people who make Mac software and early nerds, who make all the stupid sites we use. They were hanging out on Twitter because they were just online. And a lot of these people were very funny, and so they'd write little quippy, jokes, right? That's all the thing was. Like, and then somebody wrote a little leaderboard to like count favorites. So whoever got the most favorites on a joke went to the top of the. There were like 1,000 people on this thing. It was great. So slowly, though, as the money, basically the VC money, dried up and they were moving it towards a public company, they needed to sell you. And I didn't catch this shit. So all of a sudden, I'm like watching all of my friends become radical somethings, across whatever, every spectrum, right? And so this is what's it'll, so I had to figure out that, like, okay, so communities can turn like this. And there was a shelf life for internet communities for a while in there because some new network or new platform would come along and like just dice up everybody you knew, and maybe they could move off into another place, right? But all the places have dried up. Now they're all underground, right? We're in places like this. Nobody, we know that this exists, but you have to know how to get here, right? So, we're at the way station part of the internet. I don't know, like the sort of we're going to get lots of people coming off the big social networks. It's already happening, and they need places to go to create and play with each other. So I don't know. We could use more of that stuff. Anyhow, that was a rant. Sorry.
Yeah, but that's also a problem because you're fragmenting the discourse.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think a cool thing I realized recently is like we have decentralized people, like all of us were in different countries, etc.
Yeah.
But the discourse is centralized, around a certain platform or certain whatever. Right?
Yeah, and the style of discourse is determined by the money that is being pumped into the platform, right? So like you have to agree to go in there. You can actively use, I think this is a responsibility. This is my punk rock roots. You do not use things in the way they're intended. Don't do that. Like, because who is telling you to do that, right? So anyways, and the group of people that you have on Twitter, like that I've noticed that like you're hacking it, right? It's not meant to the threat, but they're catching up, right? Like the product designers are like, oh, this is a really good idea. All of these nerds just came up with a really good idea. We're going to build it into the product and then funnel ads into, like, lists were really great for a while, right? You could get around the algorithm by building these lists. And now all my lists have algorithm shit in them again, right? And I don't mind that, right? If you give me toggles to make the algorithm do what I want it to do, I want to work with an algorithm. I want to be buddies with an AI. That would be great. Let's goof around and come up with something that is cyborgy and makes both of us a better people. But yeah. So there, it's the centaur model of human computer interaction, right? Some people are on the full blown. I want a machine intelligence to run my life, right? Like I want Rome to be me. And then I don't know what I do. Like, I show up and poke it every once in a while. Like, give me a good idea. Yeah. So and then there's the other side of this, that you want to live in a cave and then like hunt with a spear or something, and you go ahead and do that. But I think there's a middle ground where, I don't know, you poke Rome with a spear. It's something like that.
Yeah.
I was joking earlier today that the acronym AI is not just for artificial intelligence, but also for augmented intelligence. So there's this story about Douglas Engelbart. The day he was given the mother of all demos in 1968, if I'm not wrong, the same day in a room next door, the same conference, John McCarthy, which was just arriving at Stanford to create the AI lab, was given another talk about the future of AI. And in some way, that was like the two possible futures for technology. And most hopes were on the AI side, artificial intelligence. Of course, 50 years later, still in the making, in that sense at least. Yep. And I believe personally that we're going to get more stuff from the augmented intelligence side of things than the other one.
Yeah, I mean, I think it makes sense. Like, I don't know why we're incenting replacing humans. It's the best model we've got so far. Like, I mean, I get the great Kurzweil to upload yourself thing. Fine. I mean, I've read a lot of sci-fi. Like, it's more like it's more fun having a body and enjoying the time you've got around, and then like making cool shit with cool tools. Like, like you feel like a superhero, like the first time you use like a Figma or something, right? Like, the first time I opened Photoshop and like, I'm like, holy shit, somebody made all this for me. And like, then I'm making lens flares all day. Lens flares is amazing, right? So, you get these like 3D applications and all this stuff, right? And the purpose of it is to get the stuff that's in us out into the world, right? And so it needs to be this like sort of harmonious thing, right? Like tooling should be built with humans in mind, and part of that tooling should be AI stuff. I'm playing with that TechSpark thing, the GPT-3, whatever, and I'm writing and it's so stupid, but it's fun because it's making me write things that I would never write ever. Because like I give it a blob, and then it's like, she ran down a corridor. And I'm like, no, she did. Fine. Okay. She ran down a corridor, and then it's fun, right? Like this is working with a computer. They're not great yet, but train that interplay, and then you can make something together, and you have like I don't want the computer press a button and like it gives me a stupid story that sounds like a bunch of mumbo jumbo, like Harry Potter mixed with some other stupid thing. It's fine. Yeah, we're this part of this story.
This is when it starts getting good.
Yeah. Yeah, this is like being in like an industry too long. Like everything is annoying. It's all terrible. It's not. I mean, there's magical shit happening everywhere, right? Like people are making the most amazing, but they're doing the stupidest shit. Like right now, like Cash, the Square company or whatever, they put out a like clothing line.
What?
It's like done by all these amazing artists. Like it's so good. All of the work, but it's a bank is doing.
It's actually good.
Yeah. What are you wearing? You're gonna wear like a fucking bank outfit, like a tracksuit? Like what? You're an artist? It's madness. This is the design world that I'm in. And like all these people are moving all this money around now, but they draw pictures. Like that's Fucking madness.
I love that. I won't have to buy Cyberpunk the game. I'll just, get in my cash car,
Exactly.
my cash shoes. Be nice to
Cashews
That's
is
good.
really good.
cashews.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Are living that thing now. Like, Cybertrucks are going to be wandering around soon. And you're just like, okay, there's a low poly artifact wandering through the world. It's just ridiculous.
Gotta dial the resolution on your Neuralink back up.
Exactly. What do you guys think about, direct human computer interfaces, like Neuralink style things, right?
Ooh,
I
we got a
want it.
no and a yes.
Want it.
Yeah.
Okay.
I want to hear the first because I'm also a yes.
Yeah.
No. I would love to use them, but they're not happening.
Okay.
We don't have the science for that yet. We do not understand the brain. But
Yeah.
once they do it, go for it. My favorite movies are all about full immersion, and my favorite anime is also about that. Like Sword Art Online, you get into a world you cannot go out, just play the shit out of it. But I don't think we're gonna see it in our lifetimes. Hopefully, yes, but
I think the real utility of the tool is going to be discovery of the mind.
Yeah, and related to that, I don't know.
But like where tools like fMRI and PET scans and all of these things fail, I think actually being able to stick, a couple hundred incredibly tiny wires into your brain will start to give us the types of information that our current technologies have failed us. And I don't really think, we're going to be able to download, apps into our brain for a really long time. And I'm not particularly interested in that either. It would be cool, but it's like, I don't know. I'd want to go outside, and then I'd be afraid of like it running out of battery, and I just want to enjoy nature.
and you're gonna get ads like you're walking around nature and boom.
Oh yeah. I mean, it's like even in the conference that they gave, somebody had asked about that, like how do you get applications onto this thing? And instantly Musk is like, oh yeah, well you connect it to your phone, and people are like, what? Like, no, it'll be okay. It's like, no. Even if you design it to be okay, somebody's gonna hack the shit out of it. That's gonna be like such a cool project to hack someone's brain.
To be actually,
Like,
They're already
You
hacking
read
our brains.
the book Nexus? There's a sci-fi book that's basically about this, taking a drug where you can convene like with each other's minds, and it's programmers that invented it. So there's programmers that can basically go into your brain and do shit. It's bonkers.
Oh, I would love that. Do
It's
some
not
spring
a very
cleaning.
good book, but it's fun.
File management.
Yeah, just clean up.
But
a
I
little
think
bit.
like Neuralink, I think will be able to provide us like insights into like PTSD, hallucinations, like crazy mental disorders that just don't seem possible, and we don't have any explanation for them. You can look at like little patterns of blood in your brain and be like, oh, look at that, that's weird.
Yeah.
I don't know what's happening, but it's weird.
I mean, I do like the component of potentially having a input device, like an input method that is closer to thought, right? I mean, that's what we're talking about in general. We just it's external currently, right? And you still have to operate something, right? So, the dream for like interface designers is to be able to close that distance, right? This is what technology does. And then what would that be like if you could directly interface?
You mean input towards you or input from you to the computer?
Yeah.
Okay.
Like, controlling and, tooling, right? Like outside. I mean, it works both ways because if
I would love to just get like a book into my brain. Like,
Yeah, like the fastest bandwidth that we have for I/O is like still just reading, and you can do that like there are the reading hacks where it just flashes one word in the same spot at like 300 words per minute. So you can read incredibly fast. But then like data output, you're limited to a keyboard, and you can still get kind of fast, but not like 300 words per minute fast.
Well, there's a, the equivalent here is like, so say in Figma, right? Or some graphical interface that I've been using for 25 years or something, right? Like it is, and I have friends who are nuts at this stuff, right? You watch them, you watch somebody in a command
Yeah.
line or something, and you're like, how? What is all that? Like, so if you could, but it's still too slow. Like, because I already have the thing cooked up in memory, like it's good to go. I already figured it out. And now I have to, and there is something to actually processing it out of your head, right? Like,
Yep.
there still always will be a friction that is necessary to produce a work, right?
Yep.
So, but where's the line of that friction? Is it, at the point that you have to literally move your hand around? And is that part of making things, right? Is typing, the tactile experience, part of cognition? And is it important in a certain way? Can you bypass that by like doing eye control or, telepathy, moving, whatever objects around in the screen in 3D and stuff? Like, I don't know. I am curious about that.
It might be hard. Like the body is a pretty good interface device.
Yeah.
Like maybe just your hands is limiting sometimes. I think actually I'm more excited for like external world becoming more computery. Like maybe with a little Neuralink. But like there does working something. I kind of think like when it's in your head and you haven't got it on paper, maybe you just think you have it because you can't see all the things that you missed.
Yeah.
So I think you probably have to work through it still, but being able to work through it in more forms and sounds nice.
Yeah, I think the more forms thing is useful, like different ways of playing with it to see what's concealed and what can be revealed. Yeah, because there's always something concealed and revealed. It's just how you're working with it. Like Conrad and I are like, what we're playing around with the tool that we want to build, that we're like hacking on now. There's such a difference in moving from linear to relationships.
Oh, there you
go. Am I back?
Yeah.
It just you get more. You get different information from linear organization of text, and if you jump into spatial orientation of text and be able to move it around, you get to see things that you didn't see before, but they were always there, but you just had to get them in another form. And then if I want to go share that with people, I'm not going to share my crazy mind map. I've done this before. People are just like, that's cool. And I'm like, thanks.
Like, where do you start in it? Yeah.
Yeah. Like if you could put it back into something somewhat linear, I mean, it's compressing things. Like it's not showing the whole thing. So then you're concealing again, but it might be more revealing for someone else to see what's on your mind. And then just do that in different, like at different phases of communication. Yeah.
Maybe we could have like a mind map, but that also has an element of time.
I think the time aspect
and it takes you from one point to another, so you can follow the reasoning or something.
What's the time based on? When you had the thought, or?
Yeah, that's a good point. Juan, sorry to go back to the topic, but that's a trail. I mean, after you break it apart and then you say, I want to make it a sequence again. And you say, start here, go there, go there, go there, go there, and here. And if you want to portray something else, then you give him another order. But whatever you call it, it's a sequence. Now to point of timestamps, Kristen, there's a time when you capture it. There's a time when you review, right? And I don't know which one's more useful, but at least I would like to have a log of all the times that I have interacted with a piece of content or visited a place, if you want to use the metaphor, and then choose whatever. I mean, my Twitter timeline for a long time was just a set of timestamps of the first time that I interacted with a specific topic, and I would just go back. I at the time, I don't know if there was no search feature or I didn't know about this from syntax, but I would just go back and scroll until I found the first occurrence of the topic. And I think that was pretty useful for a couple things. Like, oh yeah, that was the first time that I thought about Bitcoin. Bitcoin was like 6 years ago. The first time that I read this topic was 5 years ago. But then you lose all the other timestamps. You have no idea how many times you have read this specific tweet or whatever, and that would be useful.
Yeah, I mean, you
So-
get the sort of cow path thing here with this. Like certain types of information you're revisiting should have some
Yep.
denotation, right? Because
Yep.
you're clearly traveling a path that you don't know you're traveling, right?
Yep.
So the sort of what comes up for me for all of this is the types like, because we're moving into like all the interfaces are going to be synesthetic, right? You've got like text-based stuff, you've got audio stuff, you've got visual stuff, and each of these is holding different types of information, and the way you overlap them is going to produce sort of like different feelings around the information, like different ways of memorizing, different ways of, all of these things, right? So I mean, I had this experience. I'm editing a bunch of video right now for whatever reason. It just popped up, and I'm going back through journals to find like lines to overlay on the videos. And this is because I'm very visual. It's a very good way of like revisiting this stuff. And I'm listening to music at the time that I wrote it, and it's sort of bringing me back. And this is, I'm making art from it. So I'm feeling into something, right? And I don't need it to be directly timestamped. That's nice to know, though. Like when I go through it, I have everything ordered, and I can sort of glance at the time, and I'm like, I get a feel for, oh, that's May 2020, right? And I remember during that period, I was going through a lot of thinking on this stuff, and I have all my notes from it. And then I can sort of cherry pick things to put in a video. And then I made this like 15-minute long video with like slow motion stuff in the background. And then I watch this thing now. And like, the process of making this thing and finding the relevant information and then putting it in a piece of media that expresses to me, it might express to other people. I don't know what they get out of it. It doesn't really matter, but I put it out there, it holds a quantity of information that no system that I know can manage. I would love something, right? Interfaces are heading in this direction. It's just up to the engineers to figure out what can be exposed to funny designers to come up with like weird things that you can poke. So, yeah. Because honestly, that's the thing that holds me back all the time is I don't have the like crazy engineering minds to be like, you can just do this. Holy shit, put some buttons on that.
We were talking previously about making all the data much more granular. Instead of having pages, we go to having nodes of information content that can then be linked to other things. And then the ability to have one source of truth. So you just have those nodes that are self-contained and can have multiple parents and can be in multiple places at the same time. They're not associated to one specific page. So then you just have a mess of data, but then you can apply different filters, different views on top of this data to see different perspectives. And one of the most important perspectives, I would imagine, would be exactly time. So then you would be able to get a timeline for everything that you've done, all kind of computer interactions, everything that you've done in just one single timeline that you can then zoom in and scroll, and depending on how much detail you would like to see. And together with that, you can then just change the perspective when you find something interesting. So if you go back, then you could see a conversation with some person, and then you can just change the perspective to filter out everything except interactions with that person. And then you get a timeline with interaction with that person. So in this sort of sense, you just have the data like that. The interface could adapt and become the interface that you need, the perfect interface for the specific task that you're looking forward to do.
I have some ideas on like that kind of method of retrieving like the small pieces of data thing. Like consider this. If somebody is like, oh man, I got this great book and I gotta make sure that it's on the internet, so it's like around forever. And bam, they slap up a whole King James Bible. But then they're like too lazy to go through and atomize everything. I think that's fine. Because that would be a lot of work. what would be great is if you could just go to that one resource, which is massive, and then just pull pieces out of it. And then that kind of creates the atoms that link back to the parent. So when the parent changes, you're able to update like the future nodes of those changes, but still kind of maintain like, when I accessed it, it looked like this because that's, the information that was relevant. And then you can apply those types of views that you were talking about to transform that data. I think the thing about like timestamps is that they're not as nearly as important as the linkage between the flow of events, because that's really all we want the timestamps for. They're just there so we can understand how the data is connected. So we could just kind of get rid of the dependency of timestamps and then just model the data as being connected.
I'd like to say, so the somehow visualizing the relationships between these states, right? So you have some piece of content and then it changes in some way over time, over input, right? Like, for complex ideas and like problem spaces, right? You're developing these things over a period of time, right? You're adding little, and ideally that gardening of the material is producing saliences. And one of the ways that works really, like I was talking, I'm on this like sort of movement thing because I've been editing so much video, but like the movement between those two things, the relationships, the paths, how they got there, right? Like that information is important in its own right? The tweening part of it. And it can only really be experienced, felt. It's not something that you can look at, right? Like, and point to. You have to like play it. Like, oh, I'm moving in that direction. That thing is worth something, right?
Yeah.
But it's hard to quantify that and display it in a way because you can't make a list of them, right? So like, what is the interface?
But
show
what would
that?
you do with it? Yeah.
It doesn't. Yeah. Without the motion, it doesn't have the context.
There's something I'm not understanding. What can't you visualize?
Maybe you can. This is, I can't visualize it. So
what would be an example of motion?
Music.
Yeah.
Let's say you
Music is
have
a
a piece
perfect
of
example
music
of this.
that's
Yes,
like
perfect.
10
Yes.
minutes long,
Yep.
and instead of saying like it's gonna be a sequence of sounds, you will play all the sounds at the same moment. That doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
I think,
Go ahead, sorry.
I think that's because the important thing for us as humans isn't necessarily the data, but it is the algorithms that run on the data. Like for music, you could probably argue that the sheet music is just the data, but like looking at it, it's like I hate that. It doesn't make any sense. But if I feed it into the orchestra machine, then that kind of magic happens. Likewise, we could talk about how to construct chairs and stuff, but there's something fundamentally different between just having like a block of wood and actually trying to describe the action of like pushing a chisel into it, because that's very hard to do. We're much better at explaining nouns than we are defining verbs. Kind of like the qualia thing. Like, could you explain to a blind person what the color red is?
Yep. And there's all of that information that is being communicated in the process of making things, in the process of using your machine, right? Like you're coding stuff, you're doing weird magic shit. And it's not being, you don't have a log of that. You have your brain interacting with the machine there, and better interfaces allow for that magic to happen, right? So working with information like this, it is going to provide you insights, or the platform for, ideally, for insight while you're interacting with the machine, basically. Yeah. This thing is so hard to talk about. You have to talk around it all the time. So you sound crazy. Just like there's a thing and it doesn't exist, but it exists. This is the best conversation I've had on this stuff in forever. Like, it's great. You guys are great. You'll get weird. It's nice.
You have to wait around though for this to emerge. Like go through a conversation and be like, okay, let's talk about something else. Pop.
But the weirdness, yeah,
True. It's emergent. I mean, this is again, you have to like take some of these things that you all have like you're overlapping in your visions of this thing, right? So like if you can start exposing data, exposing things that can be put into interfaces, you'll get weird designers who show up and be like, oh, just do that because we love this stuff. Like because we can't do this. Like messing around with these models is, I mean, you get every once in a while a fancy designer, but they all make a lot of money at Google or something.
Google doesn't design though.
Apple then, fine.
Better.
Leonard, I did have a question about what you use like your quick entry for mostly. Is it just like journal entries, or do you try and put like code snippets in there as well?
I want to put everything in a later moment of time. But for the moment, I mostly do hour tracking. So I track when I go to sleep. I track when I wake. I track. So basically, every time I put myself in front of my computer, I write a list of what I did since the last time I sat in front of the computer. And that list has a specific kind of syntax that allows me to later parse it. And that syntax is just something that I have emerged after doing that for a couple hundred days. And it wasn't something that I specified beforehand. So I try to optimize the input. So first, I just want to get the data into the system, and then I can later do more work of trying to extract it. Because the hardest issue that I've seen people trying to do projects like this is that they do it for a week, it goes really well, and then it becomes just too annoying. So just having a window that pop up immediately when I open the screen of my computer, and I can just write, and then I get it.
I need to make a pop-up still. I still have to manually open VS Code to open my like my text file, but I'm at like 6,000 lines of just text sprawling from like the beginning of last year. And I don't know, there are like pieces where I want to be able to record kind of like what you're doing, and I haven't found a good way for myself to do that yet, because there's like a bunch of just automated things that I want to build but don't know how to build yet. I had started using it as a Zettelkasten, but I just found that I wasn't really accessing it like a Zettelkasten, so it just made sense to keep it as one massive text file. But everything's like broken out, so like I have like 3 M dashes, and that kind of breaks my idea. And then I'll put like a basic timestamp so I could go back and do days searches and stuff. And I can use just like the Linux command line stuff to like parse some of that information. Control F, works flawlessly.
Yeah.
Go ahead. Oh, but I don't know. I'm really interested in the idea of like creating something that really you could just put whatever you want into, and then it just doesn't do anything. And then inside that system itself, you can define your own algorithms for that data to be manipulated. So like you would just on the fly, oh yeah, here's the syntax I want to use for that data block in order to parse it into what I did today. So I have that data later on. So I'd love to keep talking to you about this, but I don't want to bore
that brings us back to what we were talking earlier about the description language. No, what do you call it? Like a notation, universal notation, right?
One thing that I realized like really quickly was that you definitely can't have like one syntax that kind of manages everything. And that brought me to a programming language called Racket. Have you heard of that?
Of course.
It is. Oh man, it is super cool. It's a programming language for designing programming languages. And so really people just use it to build other programming languages that kind of live inside Racket. And then you can have those programming languages be turned into other programming languages. So say you write, I write Rad Lane, Conrad language. and then it, can manipulate racket objects, and then I could actually just compile it to C or something or whatever else, because you just have to mess with the data. But it's like it's very. There was a conclusion I was trying to get to, and I lost it.
It makes information more interchangeable. The data is more interchangeable.
Yeah, because you can shape the language around the data, and you don't have to shape your data around the language. So instead of having to figure out, oh God, how do I learn C, C++? This is a nightmare. Like, no, like if you're trying to write an application for chat, the primitives that you're trying to talk about are things like messages and people, not character pointer arrays.
I mean, this sounds amazing because as someone that's not, I'm like technical minded, but I don't program yet. And like most of what, like in every job I've ever had, when I work with people to like extract data, like I want to do all of this stuff, and there's always limitations where it's like, well, we can't get to that because of this, and then this doesn't talk to that quite like that. But if you could pipe things around and have it sort of, it's more malleable, shapeable.
Another thing that's really interesting that I'll just briefly mention is Naughty Dog's actually used Racket to create the first Last of Us game. So, like normally you choose something like C, C++, Java, something that's like, super powerful and fast. But then you hand that over to like the music designers, and they don't know what the fuck to do. Like it's C, like that has C and C++ have nothing to do with music. Yeah. So they were able to pair programmers with designers and artists to help them build languages that actually make sense for them. And then, every other detail is completely irrelevant. You just work in the language that makes sense.
I love this. I like this. But, I mean, because it's the, even building this Ponder thing, right? Gustavo, the engineer, he's like, let's build it in React. I'm like, I'd been in a proprietary system with my last company. It was based on some .NET stuff, and we built a templating language and all this crazy shit, and it worked great. It was fine for me because he was building, my engineering partner was building tools to translate, do the exact thing that you guys are talking about. He's like, you don't need to know all this shit. Here's some stuff, and like play within CSS, play within HTML, like, which I'm very good at, right? Paint onto the screen, and then here's an animation library that makes sense for people who understand animation and design, right? And then we would build it together, and we didn't talk technical stuff at all, other than like, we need a rubber banding thing here, so like, what's the math to be able to do this, right? And then he would write it, like, because it was fun for him to write it. And so I've met a bunch of other engineers who like work at Netflix and these kinds of places, who are technical directors, who just build tools for artists. Because the artists can't follow you, right? Like, I'm more technically minded than most, but that interplay, though, when you can get that right and you can make a thing that like makes sense to everybody on the team, like, oh, there's a person who has this like weird like geodesic like brain, and they think in fractals or something. They need a thing that works like this so that they can pipeline their ideas into, okay, fine, let's build that. That's doable, right? So, and it spits out the things that need to go on the screen. That's all that matters. Like, at that point, the end user or the viewer or whoever, they don't care how it got there. Like, they care that it's performant and that it looks good. Like, that's what matters. So yeah, this school of thought I love. It's great. It's the most fun to do this, like design, engineer, musician pairs, right? Yeah.
Otherwise, you're just talking to people who like think similarly to you, which gets boring over time.
Yeah, it's more fun to solve people's problems, like, right? And on the other side, it's fun to like, you get somebody who's non-technical, and you can give them a tool that allows them to do something that like is so beyond anything that they could imagine. It's so fun to watch people do this. Like they're like, holy shit, I keep doing this. And you're like, yeah.
Yeah. Designed it that way.
Make it like this.
It's itching so much in my fingers. I want to create this. I want to have it done.
I mean, it starts here, goofing around with this stuff with people who get what you're talking about, so that you can, because these are huge projects, right? Like you can only you have to work with other people. Like it's you'll lose your mind if you try to go it alone on this stuff.
That is what I'm doing.
I was just gonna say, Leonard's like, yeah.
I mean, you're here talking about it. That's more than some people do. Some people, they get so idiosyncratic with this, and they build this like perfect system. They're like, look, you're like, dude, I need 3 PhDs to on-ramp to this. Like it's rough.
Yeah, it's total mind map moment,
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
oh yeah, it does everything. It's like, what is an everything? Dude,
yeah,
too big.
What are your types of everything? Because mine are different.
Then the key idea is to be able to make something that does everything and literally everything. So it doesn't matter what kind of perspective you're coming from. So it can adapt and adjust and form to everything.
Pretty recursive.
Is there? I'm trying to think if there's something else like this in the world where there's some like central
DNA
adapter thing. DNA. Okay.
Oh, not fully, but almost a little bit. The biology is so amazingly that you can have some piece of code that is you're able
so extensible.
But also you're able to mutate it. You can do random changes, but it doesn't totally collapse. With code, if you make a random change, it just falls altogether.
Completely blows his brains out.
Oh, interesting. Yeah.
Although it would be terrifying if you like edited a file on your computer and it seemed benign at first, but then developed into a cancerous program that just ate everything else. That would be cool.
That's happening with some companies out there.
Yeah.
That's a good point.
There is a salamander that has an issue with its DNA, because in the DNA there is a code that tells the DNA replication process that it should stop. But apparently in this salamander, it copies the whole DNA twice every time it duplicates its cells or every time it makes a new generation and stuff like that. So it's currently having a problem that the majority of every one of their cells contains just the DNA. So they're starting to lose vision because the cells in the eyes are getting squeezed out, and there's no place anymore for all the light sensing stuff. It's just the DNA there.
By salamander, do you mean like one specific salamander or the whole species of this particular?
No, one specific sub species.
Oh, but like a whole species of salamander has this problem. It's not just like...
Can you link this up? I want to read about this.
That's great. Oh, that is so unfortunate.
It's not great.
I hope I'm not reincarnated as one of them. That will...
A crowded salamander. You're like 10 salamanders collapsed into one.
Oh man, ultra dense salamander.
That's how you get black holes. I mean, it just keeps replicating, and then boom, salamander black hole.
What the fuck? There's another salamander that steals DNA from its male mates and incorporates it into its own genetic material across species. What the fuck? So there you go. It does exist in biology.
Well, evidently, salamanders are like the fringe of what's happening.
Holy shit.
I mean, I think a lot of the patterns for like doing all this data stuff are going to come from biology. Like
a shifting kaleidoscope genome. Yeah, I mean, there you go. I'll link this up.
Wow.
I mean, this is the cross-disciplinary stuff.
Oh, it has a good name. Kleptogenesis. Gene stealing.
Kleptogenesis.
Looting genomes from male partners. It's stashing the DNA within their own cells to pass at least some of it along to their daughters. It might be an only female lineage, too. This is great.
Be like, I like your eyes. Give me the code.
Yeah.
Oh
Zero
man.
link me the bio code.
I mean, this is great. This is going to be a really good sci-fi brainstorm right here. Biology is always weirder than you can imagine. There you go.
Yeah, it's like so it's anti-fragile in its weirdness.
Oh, that would be cool if we did have software like that, where you could just look at somebody's cool thing. They're like, yeah, look at my cool application. Like, most of it, ooh, this feature. And it just
Yeah.
slap it somewhere else.
Creative.
Stack Overflow. Look at this feature. Copy paste.
Mhm.
I mean, that's what Facebook does. So
Yeah.
they just have a lot of people doing it. So you're gonna automate all of those people into a clone machine, right? And then you've got just Mark Zuckerberg and Jarvis making whatever stories on everything.
What I'm imagining is in the interface where you write your code, everything, instead of having to go into GitHub and clone a project or find a project on some sort of package manager and find a specific project that you want to do, this creates a lot of friction, and still you need to, you reinvent the wheel all the time anyhow. So what if in your code editor, every time you try to write anything, it does some sort of Google-like autocomplete on all the other code that exists. And it also takes the context into account in such a way that if you're trying to implement some sort of logic that someone already has implemented, it can just autocomplete that out and use that.
There's actually
That would be cool.
doing a Python plugin for text editors that is like autocomplete based on some sort of machine learning.
Yeah,
I
I've
don't
seen.
know how much of that is hype and how much of that is real. But it is trying to do that.
I believe it worked pretty decently, but the issue is that it's still using imperative code. And with imperative code, there are so many edge cases and so many different syntactic variants that you can do things with that, it's tricky, it's messy. But if you have it declaratively from a top-down perspective, suddenly it becomes quite much more possible.
I think you need to start at like a very high level declarative space where you can talk and reason about behavior and state, but without any sort of implementation. And that would just be like a creative writing process where you could pass this document around as just a group of people. Similar, I think like I'm anticipating that one of the tools that somebody in this group is going to make is going to be like perfect for kind of designing something like this. You know, you could write questions about how a behavior should work, and that way you define how the behavior works, and then bam, that's your program. The implementation doesn't exist, but then you can start to like actually prove it. You know, as like
somebody
the
builds this,
mathematical
I'm going to be a billionaire. I'll give it so many behaviors. So the concept then, yeah. So you're writing in sort of natural language, like a script, effectively. Like you know.
And
Yeah,
what's important to talk about, you know, is like if you want to define a behavior, the trickiest part is you have to do that thing where you're just describing verbs, and that's really hard to do. So you kind of need ways to describe, you know, if I have an input here and I have an output here, we imagine that there's just some way to get from that point to the next point. And you could just say like, yeah, just assume that works, you know, and then maybe argue about why you think it might work. And if you argue about it long enough, you might accidentally write the code that proves that you can do exactly that.
So like in user interface stuff, working with like a UI engineer, you do this a lot, right? So like I can share like a version of this.
I feel like you're describing software developers. You argue with them long enough, you get a product.
It's true.
This is the process of mathematics. Suppose you have you know, a graph and you want to color like certain edges. Could you possibly make a graph where no colored edges, you know, like meet up? You could just start arguing about that and be like, yeah, I think you could. You know, here's an example why, here's an example why. But could you do it for all cases? And that's when somebody has to bring out the big tools to do, you know, some like graph color theory. One space that's really interesting right now, though, is it's a mathematics called homotopy type theory. And it basically it bridges the gap between like formal mathematical proofs are equivalent to programs, which are equivalent to things in category theory. Like if you write a program, you just made a mathematical proof, and it could be as simple as like 1 + 2 = 3. Like that's a proof. But those types of things are really just describing, I have a thing and it has a shape, and I want another thing which has a different shape. Could you get from one place or one, you could think about it as a shape, or you could think about it as like a location. Can I get from this location to another location, or is it literally impossible to walk over there?
Actually, our entire conversation about neural interfaces, like the like whole back and forth between linear and scattered, sounds like that process. Like really, that's kind of what thinking and doing things feels like. Is you have a shape, and then you're trying to find a transformation into another shape in all of like possibility space.
Yeah, if we're creating like branching conversations or a tree of arguments, then by having conversations, we're just performing a tree walk. We're just little robots just doing like a breadth first search on a tree of ideas, and then somebody raises their hand and like, oh, I got it. But I don't know. I think if you start with like that specification, whittle your way down into the implementation, you could continue to use that declarative, framework, which is mostly English, and then you could replace implementation pieces of it on the fly. Like even things that like compilers do to like optimize certain aspects of code, you could just say like, no, just replace, like you defined a behavior here, 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 and here that seemed unrelated when you designed it, but it turns out they're not. So we just add another behavior where after these behaviors have been implemented, then you go ahead and you just like optimize the hell out of everything.
And what's beautiful is that then, just like compilers, you can have multiple targets.
Mm-hmm.
Some of them being voice, some of them being touch, some of them being virtual reality, some of them being physical objects.
I do want
or
me
humans.
some codified physical objects.
Yeah, banana that works like a pointer. Seems great.
I'm looking forward to when this step is done, so we can move to the next step, which is going to matrix production. To move the ability first, we need to be able to fix our thoughts, and then to be able to create in the virtual world, and then we can map that to be able to create in the physical world, and then we can continue. So there are ideas of how you can do physical factories, which works a little bit like the GPU or the processor, where you can just add a program declaratively, and it will be able to adjust the factory automatically and create the specific product that you want to make. So imagine that you want to make a physical product, then instead of deploying to AWS cloud, you deploy to AXKEX factory, and then you just get your products delivered. And it can do all that dynamically on the fly. And then you can do the same, but for chemistry and biology, and using evolutionary algorithms to much, much faster be able to find and navigate the space for.
Yeah, if we could massively parallelize like chemistry work, holy shit.
Yep.
That would be revolutionizing. I haven't done any research to know why the hell we haven't though. Like
we're doing it, but it's tricky.
Is it like what's tricky? Is it the robotics? Do like things keep exploding?
It's tricky in the same way that deploying a website is tricky. So previously we did HTML and JavaScript just manually, but then we're starting getting those build systems, and now we have tools like Parcel where we can just write our code and it just works. But there were a period where it was super tricky to work with Webpack and all that kind of stuff to make things work at all. The chemistry industry is currently in that phase. They're currently starting to build their Webpacks of chemistry, bundlers, yeah. So yeah, they're trying to figure out robotics. They're trying to figure out the temperature stuff. So currently they have a lot of starting to have a lot of robotics, but only parts of the chain are automated, not everything. And there are some startups that are working on creating this kind of cloud-based environment where you can put a recipe, declarative recipe up, and it will make it for you. But yeah, they have limited tools and limited manufacturing capabilities, so you won't be able to do any kind of experiments.
We have a neighbor who's an organic chemist who does it remotely and like just ships off all of it to China for his company. And then they print it effectively. They have no idea what they're making, whatever molecules he designs. And he's just like, he does it freelance. It's ridiculous. So that's happening.
That's insane.
Yep.
Whoa.
He's a nice guy. So.
Well, then he uses his biochem knowledge to make beer. So he has like a home brewery system. It's pretty great.
Yeah, you know, building molecules, brewing beer.
But he's like modeling a molecule like digitally, and he doesn't really know how it will work. I mean, he does know, but he doesn't.
Yes. Like he has a better he's been doing it for, he's an older guy. So like he's been doing this for a long time, but the way he describes it is he hops online, he's got some problems to solve, he builds some molecules for it, ships it off like to a 3D printer. I mean, that's what it feels like. You know, you're building something in 3D Studio Max.
Probably doing research on it, right? Like,
yeah, but it seems pretty modularized. Like,
yeah,
he's not like leading a team that's, you know, he's plugging in some iteration on a molecule, I think.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah. So I imagine some amount of that's going to be automated, but yeah.
In organic chemistry, when you do synthesis, you usually start with some sort of base materials, and then you have multiple different processes that works like functions that you can apply on top of these molecules, and then they will either add some sort of groups or remove groups, and by doing that, you can start building up the molecule like this, and then have something in between, and then add another step that just removes the thing in between, and it will collapse, and it will create a different shape. So just like we with code can imagine, see a design of a web page, and then just think, oh, then we need to do it structured like this, because then it's going to flow like that, and then we need to do these steps, and then we just go to the computer and write down the code. I believe for organic chemistry is something similar. You can just imagine, okay, this is the molecule, I know this kind of steps, I should apply it in this order, and then I just write it down and send the instruction off.
Well, what's the equivalent of an organic chemistry website?
The stakes are very different, because if your code doesn't work, like just crashes and that's it. But with the organic chemistry, you kill someone or something like that.
Yeah, so that is one of the other amazing things with going physical, with moving from the virtual space to the physical space. And that's also one thing that's so amazing with simulations, that currently we are in a unique position in software development where we have such a fast feedback loop. We can make something and almost immediately see the results of it. And that allows us to learn very, very quickly and try out things and move very fast. But with chemistry, it usually takes maybe 2 weeks to have it synthesized if you're unlucky. And then it didn't work. And then how do you debug it? And yeah, so they have all the same kind of issues, but their feedback cycle is much larger.
So long. Yeah. Well, apparently, like the COVID vaccine, the first dose of it was like administered March 16th, like 2020. So it's been around for a while, but they have to go through trials to see how the chemistry of the molecule in different people over different times. I'm sure they have different ways of storing it, different ways of dosing it, like different administration styles. Yeah. So it takes forever, but I mean, are we being too careful? Like I'm sure there's people that would experiment with drugs I mean, they do, like psychedelic drugs. Isn't there a bunch of like designer drugs where people show up at certain parties and they're just like, I cooked up this shit and it's kind of like this, and I've dosed myself and I'll tell you what it does to me. And people are like, cool, like I'll take some of that. That stuff has not gone through any rigor.
I mean, the early chemists were alchemists. They're like trying to come up with gold. We're just going through another round of that right now, you know, like all the stuff that we're trying to combine, you know, 100, 200 years from now, if we haven't boiled the whole place, you know, we're going to have better language around this stuff.
If ever read any of Shulgin's books? He's the guy who created MDMA.
Oh, is that the what is it? Fecal or
yeah,
Cal
TCal.
and Pical.
yeah.
He had this structure, or he had like a couple of structures that were psychedelic, and then he went on and like essentially invented something like 200 new psychedelics just by swapping out random groups on the atoms. And he's like, okay, well, if like swapping out this functional group changes it this way, what if I swap out this functional group? And so yeah,
he recorded like the results.
But you can pop around in a space relatively easily.
Yeah.
Yeah. What's that documentary TV series that we watched, Dave, with the
Hamilton's
guy?
Pharmacopoeia.
Yeah, if you're interested in psychedelics, it's an interesting. He's a PhD in
missile silo guy.
I don't think so. He's a organic chemist, but like he made a TV show where he goes and tries all these substances and then talks about the organic chemistry. So he experiences them, like goes to shamans and stuff, and then he breaks down how they work and like how serotonin uptake, blah blah blahs, and you're like, all right, cool. It's it's entertainment, but it's still fun. Like
you get to meet some of the chemists that are behind it though, and they talk, and some of them are older, and they talk about like how they came at the problem and like what was like the problem, as it were, and what that experience was like, and what it was like to cook up batches of this stuff, and when you would find like a new kind of it. It's interesting.
The missile silo guy was like holding giant LSD parties. He was like making huge quantities of LSD and then just having this huge party at like a missile silo that had been abandoned. The CIA was trying to track him, and they finally found him because like one of his 15 girlfriends was like, I'm sick of doing acid all the time. I'm out of here. She got a new boyfriend, and the dude was like pretty upset about that and kidnapped the boyfriend and like murdered him. And the CIA.
Oh, no.
Yeah, it was like a pretty graphic murder too. Like,
so let that be a lesson to all of us. No making lots of LSD digitally.
What was the name of the documentary?
I just dropped it in the links channel. Hamilton's Pharmacopoeia. I think it started on Vice maybe, but I think it's streaming on Hulu now.
Sounds like the Doors of Perception kind of.
Yeah.
It's like a modern day, more buttoned up version.
Yeah, it is similar to that. I actually just reread that book recently.
There's a lot of really interesting history about magic mushrooms too. Like, they've been around forever. Like, cultures have known about them for a very, very long time. But like the discovery of magic mushrooms in like 60s and like mid 70s in Mexico, like basically destroyed the culture. Because they were like utilized as, a medicine and like this cultural artifact, and then all these white people were like, whoa, Party Central down in Mexico, let's go.
Yeah. And apparently the same thing is happening with ayahuasca now.
Yeah.
Well, it becomes tourism. Like you get people in New York who are like, well, I'm going to pop down to Peru, Brazil, and like, rent out a shaman or whatever. And poop in a bucket next to their friends. Sounds great. Have a transformational experience or 3. Yeah. I mean, the flip side of that is, I guess, like, science is institutions are like finding the therapeutic uses for some of these substances, and hopefully it'll help with PTSD and all the rest of the mess. I mean, the guided mushroom stuff or psilocybin stuff is, I think, extremely useful for like trauma work. So But yeah, there's probably a ton to learn from like how it's been administered for thousands of years, right? Like
Yeah.
you have to
Yeah,
rebuild all
like
these like
one thing
Rituals.
that's really interesting is like for the rituals and stuff, like most of the time you weren't taking the medicine. You would go to a shaman and the shaman would take the medicine and you would just
Interesting.
sit there with the shaman and he would have
And they would like channel you. Yeah.
and that's how situations would be resolved. Like you didn't necessarily have to do anything. That was the shaman's job.
That's interesting. That kind of makes I mean they're going to know a lot more about how to do journey work and stuff like and what's
Yeah.
coming up, and then you're in this
Don't lose your shit. Yeah.
you're in this like empathetic state there. You've like boiled away most of your ego, and which means that you can hear the other person. And if you're practiced at this, you can hear stuff in what they're telling you that, you know, if your brain is online, you wouldn't be able to process. So you can reflect back in that state like a hyper therapist, basically, without any, that's weird. Yeah, that's a good note for me to end on.
I saw a documentary recently that was comparing Aldous Huxley Brave New World to 1984. Saying like, well, which future and which of these futures are we on now?
What's the documentary
called? Little
called?
column B.
Yeah.
I don't remember. Let me see.
Yeah, please thank you when you remember. I'm gonna head out as well. So this is a great chat, guys.
Yeah, it's fun.
See you all
It was a lot of
tomorrow
fun.
as well, and see what you guys are building later.
Yeah, cool.
Sounds good.
Okay.
Thanks everybody.
Yep.